real quick here, let's go into a quick disclaimer. Like I mentioned on any other section here, anything from this course that you learn here is purely for educational purposes and is meant to be used for ethical hacking only, unless given permission to do so prior. So there are 5 phases that make up an attack. The first one is reconnaissance, the information gathering, the scanning, the actually looking at the network and looking at what is available for us to exploit. And then the gaining access. This is where we actually tied up the actual network. We are in there through whatever kind of loophole that we found. And then maintaining access once we're there, installing backdoors or utilizing a myriad of different methods to maintain that access, and then covering our tracks, right? Making sure that we cover up any type of evidence or information that lets anybody else know that we've actually been there, so that when they go look at their network, they are not able to find any tracks from us, right? And so let's go into these one by one. So reconnaissance, right? We have already gone through this, but I want to kind of give you a brief overview of what reconnaissance is here. So phase 1, reconnaissance, right? We talked about passive here, where an attacker does not interact with the system directly. And then we have the active, where the attacker is actually interacting with the system by using tools to detect open ports, different availabilities that are there to be able to connect to, right? The passive is where somebody can be across the world and just not really connected to anything. And then the active is actually where there's some sort of connection made to the network through some kind of port or whatever kind of loophole available. And then phase 2, we have the scanning. So this is where we are using the information that we gathered and we're looking to find different vulnerabilities. So an attacker can gather critical information on a network, such as mapping the system, the router, and the firewall. So for example, when attacker is looking at a particular system, they're looking to map it out. They want to look at, okay, how does everything connect? Does one particular department have their system or their network set up a certain way? Let's say the marketing department, how are they set up versus like the sales department versus the HR department, right? And then how do they all connect to the main network of the entire system, right? And so they're looking at how everything is set up, all the different firewalls, essentially looking at any roadblocks that may come into play, right, with their actual attacks that they're planning. And then the port scanners, this is how they use to essentially scan the system, look at the information, look at the actual machines. Vulnerability scanners, these are the most commonly used tools. This is where we're going into gaining access. This is where the most damage happens here, because once access is gained, they can do quite a bit of damage here to the actual network. They can do quite a bit of damage here to the network based on the different techniques that are actually presented in this program. So access can be gained locally, offline, over LAN, over the internet, and then a hacker's chance of gaining access into a target system are influenced by factors such as architecture and configuration of that particular target system, how it's mapped out, how everything's connected, if one is connected to the other, what's the proximity, right? What's the area of coverage, and then the skill level of the hacker, how advanced are they, what kind of skill level do they have, what kind of tools and techniques do they have, and then the initial level of access obtained. So now let's go into phase 4, maintaining access. So with maintaining access, this is where we want to remain undetected, right? And we want to remove any evidence of the intrusion. And so what happens here is, more often than not, a backdoor is installed or a Trojan is there to be able to allow them to get repeated access without leaving any kind of footprint. And then also installing rootkits to gain full administrative access to the target system. Hackers can use Trojan horses to transfer usernames, passwords, and any other information stored on the system. These are very, very powerful tools to be able to transfer that information and essentially to maintain access to the system. And then organizations can use intrusion detection systems or deploy traps known as honeypots and honeynets to detect intruders. So oftentimes organizations that have an actual cybersecurity strategy or plan already in place, they'll have these essentially as bait to trap those actual intruders. And then phase 5 here, covering tracks. And a good hacker will always erase all evidence of their actions. And with the Trojans, such as a PS or a Netcat, these tools are used often to erase the attacker's activity from the system's log files. So let's look at steganography. This is a process here of hiding data and other data. For instance, an image or sound files where there can be encrypted data or information in there. And then we have tunneling. This is where you can take advantage of the transmission protocol by carrying one protocol over another. So now let's look at what exactly is social engineering. I want to give you more of an in-depth understanding of what this is about. Anthony's going to go quite in-depth into this section as well. I want to give you a bird's eye overview of what this entails here. So social engineering is the art of manipulating users into revealing confidential information that can be used to gain unauthorized access to information. So let's look at some of the common social engineering attacks. So let's look at phishing attacks. And these are the most common types of attacks that are leveraging social engineering techniques. So this is where attackers are using emails, social media, and instant messaging, and also SMS through text message to trick victims into providing sensitive information or visiting malicious URLs, websites to attempt to compromise their systems. And then waterholing attacks consist of injecting malicious code into the public web pages of a site that the target used to visit. So just think about like a simple website such as like yahoo.com where it gets a ton of traffic. They could put in some type of malicious code in there where that anybody that visits that website can get automatically infected, right? So that's how they're able to use a waterhole attack. And then we have pretexting. This is where the hacker is presenting themselves as someone else in order to obtain private information. And usually this is where an attacker creates like a fake identity or a persona to use it to manipulate the receipt of information.